All right. Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Tonight is Monday, August 9th, 2021, and this is your evening tropical update where we have a new storm to talk about. We were talking about Invest 94L yesterday. Well, now the Hurricane Center has went ahead and named this potential Tropical Cyclone 6 at 5 p.m. this afternoon. The system is currently located near the Lesser Antilles and is really moving to the west-northwest at about 15 miles an hour, and the general track looks like it's going to track through most of the Caribbean islands over the next several days and could be an issue for the southeast United States by the late this weekend or early next week. So let's go ahead and get into the latest without no delays. We're looking at the National Hurricane Center's 5-day forecast. This is the first cone they've came out with, and it's potential tropical cyclone because we have tropical storm watches up for most of the northern Antilles. We also have watches up for Puerto Rico and much of the Dominican Republic this evening, all those highlighted in yellow on your screen. When the Hurricane Center has a storm that's not quite fully developed yet, but is going to be soon, but it's within the 40-hour window of those tropical storm watches, they'll go ahead and they'll set the potential tropical cyclone label. It's kind of a placeholder name just until the storm kind of finishes getting itself together. We can tell this isn't quite a fully developed tropical cyclone yet because we are still waiting on a fully closed surface circulation. Geez, this was an ISCAT pass from earlier today. It's a little bit old now. It's about 8-10 hours old. But earlier today, ASCAT caught a beautiful shot of the storm. You don't normally get an ASCAT pass this good, and the high resolution satellite wind instrument was able to capture what is a really strong trough axis earlier. A very, very sharp trough axis with winds almost trying to finish wrapping around. But we're unable quite to do so. You have this really nice lobe up here, but you really don't have those westerly winds yet. Now, this was earlier. Now, seeing what this looks like without this pass, and this pass is very hit or miss. You get it once, maybe twice per day, so it's hard to tell. But as you look at the visible satellite imagery, the last couple frames right before dark, you can look near Barbados here and look around where those low-level winds are, low-level clouds are. And the rotation really looks like in those last few frames, if you focus on the low-level clouds, not those upper clouds, you might just be getting a bit of a westerly flow here, but it looks more mid-level because Barbados is still observing a northeast wind. So the question of is this actually closed off yet remains to be seen. Barbados still getting a northeast wind, so either the surface circulation is more south of Barbados and your low-level center is something down here, or the low-level center is tucked up further north and your mid-level center is maybe down here, and they're still getting that northeast wind. So whatever the case is, it looks like that surface circulation is very close, but it's not quite there yet. And that's the first check mark we have with PTC 6 tonight. Where do we actually get the surface circulation center? Is it down here by Barbados? Is it tucked up here, up in this nice belt of upper level thunderstorms and all that up here on the northern edge of the CDO? Because that kind of makes your starting point. And if you take your starting point here or here and draw the same line, you can have different effects, and it also affects how the steering patterns feel the storm in a couple days. So that's the first thing we're looking for tonight. And until the hurricane hunters get in there, we get another ASCAT pass, or we get some more visible satellite imagery tomorrow morning, it's going to be difficult because now the sun, of course, is set, and we really don't have a whole lot more. But last few frames there, you can see some thunderstorms firing on the westward, or the westward edge of the storm, indicating that 94L, or what is now PTC 6, is still definitely getting itself together. Dry air does still lurk ahead of the storm, and that will be one of the main factors for intensification limitations in the short term. You can still see the slug of darker air right here, which is that dry air kind of coming around, although it really hasn't shown that it's wrapping into the storm yet. You can see a pretty good barrier of more moist air that's kind of keeping PTC 6 in a nice little cocoon. As the storm continues to spin up and intensify, this dry air will eventually try to wrap around and into the storm, but it really depends how strong the vortex is and how that looks in the longer term. But that dry air honestly doesn't look as good as it did yesterday. So I think that this thing has enough time and enough going for it to at least steadily intensify through the next couple of days, which is what the Hurricane Center does expect. They expect a 40 to 50 mile an hour tropical storm in the next couple of days before it manages to get into the islands. And that's where our second check mark comes into play. So once we have the actual where the storm actually sets up, again, is it down here and off to the races? Is it down up here and off to the races? Is it somewhere in the middle and we're off to the races? Because these little subtle track shifts make a big deal because lying ahead of PTC PTC6 is Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, two of these big islandy, or I'm sorry, mountainy islands. And those mountains and high terrain will definitely cause significant disruptions. GFS shows you this pretty well, so we'll watch the GFS come through here and intensifies the storm through Tuesday and into Wednesday morning, skirting just south of Puerto Rico on this run of the GFS, but that's kind of been a trend further south than further north. The GFS is trending, pulling the storm a little bit further south each run. But we see here as it gets into the Dominican Republic, it quickly falls apart. You can see from a nice closed vortex to basically an open wave in the mid levels. That definitely a significant slacking the storm takes over Dominican Republic, which is very common. If you have a smaller, weaker tropical storm moving directly over this island, it will cause serious damage to the storm most likely. And then it looks like the storm takes a couple days. It takes Friday, even into Saturday, for it to restart. And then on the GFS, it spins it back up in the Gulf of Mexico and then pushes it into the Big Bend of Florida or the Florida Panhandle. So that's just one run. We're not going to worry about the end of that too much because that's still, that's a little more than a week out. That's like 8 days out. That's a little far for these forecasts. But it illustrates the point here that these micromanages of the track are a big deal because if this storm was managing to move further south of the islands or further north of the islands and could skirt past Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, again, a graze of the island is not going to destroy the storm. An outright landfall will. It will significantly hurt the storm and it will take it some time to recover from that if it does at all. Whereas a grazing blow may allow PTC6 or what will soon be Tropical Storm Fred to probably weather that to a degree, and then you're putting a stronger storm into the Caribbean, or I'm sorry, into near Cuba and the Straits of Florida as you go into Friday and through the weekend. And that is our third real question with this storm is, okay, we get it through the islands, we get it formed up, we get it through the islands initially, then we get it near Cuba and Florida towards the weekend. What does that look like? Well, in some respects, it doesn't look very good because the water is incredibly warm in this region. The water temperatures are 30 to 31 degrees Celsius. That's mid to upper 80s in terms of Fahrenheit. And there are reports off of, say, Miami near Virginia Key where the water temperatures are closer to like 92 degrees. I mean, there is some roiling hot water in this region. It is prime for a storm to move into it and take advantage of that. And water that warm will really help a storm get going. If it's anything worth spinning up and taking advantage of. So it's pretty critical how PTC6 or Fred looks when it's in this region of the forecast because the confidence in this track is fairly solid, like the general motion of the track. We know it's going to be here in a couple days. The question really is, how does it exactly get there? But one of the other issues and one of the flies in the ointment is the upper level wind shear. So as we see here going into Friday afternoon on the GFS model, this is your 200 to 850 millibar wind shear map. You have an upper level low over northern Florida, and what this is doing is pushing some southwest wind shear over much of the region here. And on this map by Friday, the storm is probably going to be somewhere here or maybe even somewhere here closer to South Florida. And this wind shear, does this combine with the already weakening of the islands to actually make not much of a storm? Or is a much stronger Fred able to, like, say, pinball, kind of sneak through these islands, not really take a direct hit? You have a significant tropical storm or possibly even a low-grade hurricane here, and then this upper-level wind shear isn't able to do as much damage. If you already have a weak, disorganized, wounded storm trying to get near Cuba, and then it hits this pocket of wind shear, it may be enough to keep it pinned down and not be a big problem. If it's much stronger and it's going into that very warm water, this may not be enough to offset it, and we may have a fairly strong tropical storm or possibly a hurricane, and somewhere in Florida or the eastern Gulf of Mexico may still have to deal with this. So this is kind of the balancing act we're looking at tonight and some of the issues with PTC6. I'll quickly run through your computer models. Always kind of run through these. European and GFS ensemble still mostly weak. There aren't many members that are strong, and the few for the Euro, for example, that are strong are all real high in north and look like more they're outliers. So the general consensus from your big computer models, your Euro and your GFS, say weak. They're saying leaning more south and more west, probably more pushing it towards the Gulf of Mexico. That doesn't mean anyone in Florida can take their guard down. This is kind of like Elsa. If it comes up to the right side of the state, more people get rain and wind and tornadoes and all that fun stuff. So not like you're out of the woods by any means. But again, the what is here, day 5, day 6, day 7, is still definitely up in the air. This kind of falls in line well with the hurricane models, all kind of showing the same thing. Again, they're clumped up, but I wouldn't get too caught up in how clumped up they are because these models will shift around. That this already looks way different than it did 24 hours ago. Wouldn't be too concerned with this. And then your intensity models not buying a whole lot yet. They still mostly are thinking tropical storm and low grade at that. Just the ships and one or two other models kind of outstanding ships at Category 1, which is possible still, of course, but ship's model has been kind of overshooting these storms this year, so I wouldn't read too much into it. So that's what I got for potential Tropical Cyclone 6. Definitely a concern for Florida, and still a concern for parts of the eastern Gulf of Mexico. That's Florida's Panhandle, as well as Mississippi, Alabama, and probably even Louisiana would want to keep an eye on it for right now. It may not get that far east, but or west, but if it's close and you're in that area, you may get a lot of wind and rain and whatnot. But again, a lot of question marks still to go, but some time still to go. This thing will be in the vicinity of Florida in about 4 days, and then we'll probably be, looking at a late weekend or early next week sort of landfall somewhere. And again, we could have an absolute ragged mess that just getting blown apart by wind shear and land interaction, or if it plays its cards right, we could have a concerning storm, to say the least, down here near Cuba. So I wouldn't sleep on this one, but I also would be running for the hills. I would just kind of keep your eye on the forecast. You can keep it here, Redbeard's weather page, or wherever else you get your information, National Hurricane Center, Tropical Tidbits, wherever you got to go to get your information. Just keep a close eye on it, and we'll be keeping you updated on the storm as we go through. Real quick look at the rest of the tropics, guys. We have Tropical Storm Kevin. It's really not going to do much more. It's kind of struggled to get going. This one behind it is up to 90%, and this is probably going to actually be a hurricane. This is probably going to be a nice little hurricane, but it should also stay offshore and kind of follow Kevin, out to sea and not be a big deal. Joint Typhoon Warning Center has called the last two advisories on Lupit and Mirene. Both these systems are now post-tropical. Lupit still bringing some weather to northern Japan. That'll move out tonight. And then it looks like the western Pacific will be quiet as well. And find the Atlantic Basin, guys, once after PTC 6, nothing else on the map. The other area behind it kind of dropped off the map. That wave will kind of run into the Caribbean, so we'll have to watch this down the road. And it looks like activity probably only picks up after 6. So don't let your guard down. This won't be the only storm we deal with in August for sure. So that's all I got for you guys this evening on your tropical update. As always, thanks for watching. Have a good one.